Hello. So today we're going to talk about AeroMedical Factors. Not only are we managing our airplane, but we also need to manage ourselves as pilots. And there's a lot of human factors and physiological factors that we need to account for when we're flying airplanes. Some are minor, but some are very significant, and it's important that we can avoid these and then identify them and also be able to get out of any situation that we happen to find ourselves fall into. Of course, to begin with, this is my little whiteboard. Uh, every pilot is required to have a medical, except for certain applications. But in our sense, as a private pilot, you need to at least have what is called a third class medical. So there are three classes of medical: first, second, and a third class. The first and the second class medicals are going to be for your commercial pilots, people who are flying for compensation. And those are only good for 1 year. And then after that 1 year and or 6 months, depending on the age, they will revert to a third class medical. So, but all you need to fly private pilotly and recreationally is a third class medical. What I meant by age is if you are under the age of 40, it's good for 5 years. And if you're above the age of 40, it's only good for 2 years. And then you have to get a new medical. Now, let's say you are unfortunate enough to have a disability of some sort. There is this thing called a SOTA, which is a statement of demonstrated ability, and pretty much you do this and you show that with your disability you can operate and perform in an aircraft safely for in the public. And if you can demonstrate that, you'll get a SOTA, and they don't expire. And the only way you lose a SOTA is if your condition happens to get worse and you're unable to demonstrate, good performance in an airplane. And that's the importance of that. So now we're going to cut to our health factors and physiological problems, okay? First things first is hypoxia. You notice I wrote it in red, and it's because it's pretty significant for us pilots flying in less dense air. So what happens with hypoxia is when your blood doesn't have enough oxygen to bring to your organs and stuff like that. So it's important that we recognize hypoxia because it can lead to headaches, drowsiness, and a form of euphoria, which euphoria is especially dangerous because you won't realize when you're in a problem, such as a stall or flying into terrain. So hypoxia is super important to deal with in the sense of you need to. Man, I keep saying the dumbest stuff. All right, so now we're going to cut to our health factors and physiological factors that we deal with as flying. I highlighted some red, and I think those are the significant ones that pilots will deal with the most and can lead to some very dangerous situations. So starting off first, we have hypoxia, not enough oxygen in the blood. This could lead to headaches, drowsiness, and even euphoria. Euphoria is especially dangerous as a pilot because you won't realize you're in a problem or a dangerous situation, such as a stall or flying into terrain. It's very important that you notice this, and if you do, there's two things you can really do: is descend down to a lower altitude where there's more dense air, or you can have supplemental oxygen in your airplane, which you should already have if you're planning on flying at an altitude so high. Next thing is hyperventilation. That's when you don't have enough CO2 in your body. And the problem with this is it could lead to headaches, visual impairment, tingling in your body, and even unconsciousness, which is extremely dangerous when you're trying to fly an airplane. Super important to slow your breathing down and take big, deep breaths, maybe even use a bag and blow into the bag. And what this does is it will get more CO2 back in your body and normalize everything. So next thing is middle ear and sinus problems. Where this comes from is our ears. We have little air pockets in our ears that are pressurized, of course, to the air around us. Now, if we were to climb up an altitude, we're going to feel a little irritation, not irritation, but a little bit of a, not irritation in our ears with the change in air pressure between, to our ears and the outside air. Now, if you have sinus problems, there are little tubes that regulate that air pressure, and they could be blocked with having sinus problems. And the problem there is the pressure could build so much that the pain is just too much, and or you can even damage your eardrums. And it's super important that if you do notice this, what you need to do is close your mouth and pinch your nose and blow air. And what that does is it's going to push whatever is blocking those tubes that regulate the air, and it should open them up to where they can equal out, and it won't hurt as much. Next one is spinal disorientation. This is incredibly important for pilots because we need to know how we're oriented when we're flying. And there's plenty of things that can happen to a pilot while he's flying that could disorient a pilot and lead them to crash an airplane, which is incredibly important. You have multiple systems that you use to orientate yourself. So we have the main ones that we really use is our visual system and our vestibular system. And if you're not familiar with the vestibular, pretty much there's just tubes in your ears that have liquid in them, and how you orientate your head, the liquids move, and it tells your brain how you're supposed to feel. Now, that's easy when we're on the ground, but when we're up in the air, it's super easy for our vestibular system to get disoriented because we're flying in an airplane. And what this can lead to is certain illusions, such as the most popular is the graveyard spiral. When you think you're flying straight and level, but you're actually spiraling down only to crash to the ground. Pretty much, and then there's also even visual illusions that we can have, such as false horizons, or when we're flying at night and we can't see the lights. It's important that when we're flying, we always reference to our instruments. So the way to avoid this, they're kind of hard to notice, but the best thing you can always do is to check your instruments and make sure that they tell you what you want. So if you're trying to fly straight and level, make sure your instruments say that you're flying straight and level. And that's pretty much the best thing you can really do to avoid getting disoriented and leading to an accident. Next thing is motion sickness. A lot of pilots deal with it, and that's pretty much when your body, your mind has conflicting information about what's going on, which can happen a lot when you're flying. And this could lead to, sick, vomiting, drowsiness. But a lot of pilots deal with this, and it just kind of takes some time to get used to and let your body adjust to the different environment that you're going to be in for a minute. If you can't overcome this sickness, though, it's something you really need to work on if you want to be a pilot. But most pilots get over it, and you just need some time to adjust to it. Carbon monoxide poisoning. We do have an engine that's running that we're using to fly, and what we do is we use some of that exhaust to heat up our airplane. And this is fairly common when you're doing this, and you could be using a heater or the defroster, and carbon monoxide could start pouring into the cockpit when you do that. It's tasteless, it's odorless, it's really hard to notice, but thankfully, and the problem with it is carbon monoxide will replace your oxygen molecules in your blood, which just can lead to, hypoxia and stuff like that, which is not a good time. The way to notice it is the airplanes that we have, they have little carbon monoxide indicators. I don't know how reliable they are, but there's something there that you need to keep an eye on to make sure they aren't notifying you of any problem with carbon monoxide. And also, you might have the ability to smell the exhaust coming into the cockpit, which usually is not normal at all. And if you do notice this, if you're able to figure this out, turn off all heaters, all defrosters, open your air vents so you get some fresh air coming in, and any windows, like the little window next to the student, is a good way to vent out good air. Next one, it's also red, fatigue and stress. Super important for pilots. Fatigue, of course, you need to make sure that you're maintaining your body and you're getting plenty of sleep before a flight. This could lead to more acute hypoxia and drowsiness, of course, and you could lead to a lot of errors when you're flying. Of course, stress is another big one. Stress is just the ability, the physiological ability to get something or get things like done or something like that. Pretty much though, when it comes to stress is a balance, and you can have too little stress or you could have too much stress, and you need to have about a middle balanced ground of stress, because too little stress, you're going to be complacent and make simple errors that could lead to a big problem. Or if you are overstressed, you might not think properly and make abrupt decisions and ultimately lead to another dangerous situation. You need to make sure that your stress is about right at the middle, and you don't cause any problems, and follow the procedures. Finally, we have dehydration. Of course, drink water and stay hydrated. We are flying in the sun a lot, and that could lead to a heat stroke or dehydration or something like that. So it's just important that you drink about 2 liters every day of water, and just make sure you avoid getting dehydrated. And typically you're going to feel kind of sluggish if you don't have enough hydration like that. And that's pretty much it. Okay, and finally we're going to talk about alcohol and drugs. First things first, alcohol and flying have no place in the aviation world. Okay? You need to wait 8 hours before consuming any alcohol, or before flying in the airplane after consuming alcohol, and you need to have lower than a 0.04 to go flying. So you never want to incorporate alcohol with flying. You also do not want to carry any passengers that are intoxicated from alcohol, which can lead to a lot of health problems when you're flying with them in the passenger seat. Drugs. There are, on the FAA website, listed drugs that you can take before going on a flight in case you need them. But typically you're not going to want to take drugs when you're flying because of the decrease in atmosphere. With the less oxygen you're breathing, you're more susceptible to get intoxicated from these impairments, which is super important. And finally, we have altitude-induced depression sickness. Very specific, but very significant when you're flying an airplane. This is for the people that go scuba diving. When you go scuba diving, you're going to be subject to increased pressure of nitrogen, or increased pressure, and what that does is going to dissolve a lot more nitrogen into your skin than normal. And if you were to go flying with this nitrogen in your skin, it could lead to a lot of emergencies when you're flying. So it's very important that you wait at least 24 hours before flying after scuba diving. Now there are ways where it's only 12 hours, but generally to be safe you're going to want to wait a full 24 hours before flying an airplane after scuba diving. And that's it. Those are the AeroMedical factors, and these are very important for all pilots to make sure that we keep our bodies safe even though the airplane is fully ready to fly. Thank you.